Hello and welcome to Weird Around Illinois. For those of you who've been with us for a while, you've heard us talking about cryptids and aliens and ghosts. There's one thing that you haven't heard us talk about, and that's vampires. So that kind of brought us to the question, are vampires cryptids? Let's find out, and let's get weird. So I guess we should start with a definition. What is a vampire? Well, according to Merriam-Webster, a vampire is the body of a dead person believed to come from the grave at night and suck the blood of sleeping persons. But there are more definitions than that because the vampire's been with us for quite a while, even longer than Merriam-Webster.
Yeah, according to multiple sources, read Tonica, History Channel actually themselves, they've claimed that the first sightings, I guess you could say, are claims of seeing these vampire or like dead, aggressive walking corpses was in ancient Greece, all the way back there, and almost like in a timeline going all the way up to the medieval times. Both of those kind of times were the biggest frames in time where I guess historical figures have claimed that they've seen these kind of things.
So I know there was kind of a case of parallel development. There was a creature that was popular in Chinese mythology and still is, I believe. It's kind of like half vampire, half zombie. And sometimes they're even referred to as ghosts, but they're those weird hopping zombie-like things that are the bodies of the dead that are being led by some magic user to their final resting place.
Yeah, we've seen them in a lot of movies. I have no idea if that's like based off of true history, that like, I guess, mythology of some kind.
I would think it has to be. I mean, it's a common trope in a lot of those supernatural kung fu movies that, you've got the hopping zombies with the tags on them, and it seems like half the time those things drink blood like vampires.
Yeah, and it has the just completely white face, like absolute lack of blood.
Yeah. There are a lot of different types of vampires that we can talk about. We mentioned those from ancient mythology. Probably the most popular vampire is the Dracula type vampire, which actually kind of another case of parallel development. I mean, Dracula was sort of a copy of the book Nosferatu, and there was another book called The Vampire that came out about the same time or within 10 years of those other books. But that was kind of the classic, like, romantic, I want to drink your blood type vampire. The wealthy, sophisticated, at least the Dracula version, not the Nosferatu version. But I think that's kind of what led us to kind of the modern interpretation of vampires that I find a little annoying.
Yeah.
The Twilight vampire.
Yeah.
The soulful, watery-eyed teen vampire, with the rugged good looks that makes all the girls swoon and doesn't apparently smell like death.
Yeah, I mean, before it was like this scary creature that might be cryptid, and now it's just like one random character in a Nickelodeon show. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. And
it's gotten to that point.
I thought about that a little bit more, and I realized there was probably an intermediate step too. There was this series of books started with an interview with a vampire. It was called The Vampire Chronicles. It was basically like vampire erotica would be the best way to describe it. It was cheap romance novels with vampire lore woven into them.
Oh.
And I think that kind of spawned the whole Twilight thing. And I guess we've talked enough about that. Let's get on to some other vampires. I like the viral vampire. This goes all the way back to like The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, where you've got the vampirism basically being a plague. These are humans, and they get infected with this plague that makes them crave human blood. And
you know what? There was actually medieval times. I remember reading the vampires actually spread a plague of some kind. So it was almost like a disease, as you're saying in the movie.
Yeah, I think they were blamed for the Black Plague, if I'm not mistaken. Well, of course, everything was blamed for the Black Plague.
That's true.
But yeah, vampires were one of the things.
Would that be spread like if they bit like another person?
Yeah.
Kind of like a zombie?
Yeah. Robert McGammon did a great book about that. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name of it, but it was about this plague of vampirism spreading across the world, like starting in LA. And it was a really fascinating book because it looked at it like a virus, not like not romanticized at all.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And then there's the vampire creature. That's more of a Nosferatu-like vampire. That's like basically this wild beast that drinks the blood, almost like a humanoid chupacabra. That's more in the ancient lore. You don't see so much of it recently, but I'd say it's pretty close to what you get in, I guess like 30 Days of Night is kind of a fusion of the viral vampire and the vampire creature, where they don't talk, they don't really have any human characteristics other than looking human, aside from the head vampire, I suppose. And then there was another type you were talking about, right?
Yeah, there's also like vampire spirits. They're like demonic spirits that basically like feed off of people's energy and can like drain their energy. So instead of taking their blood, basically they take their energy.
Okay, I know I seem to have a cheap horror movie for everything we're talking about here, but one of my favorites from back in the 80s, a movie called Life Force, was about space vampires that actually came and did exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, really?
They would like touch somebody and drain their life energy out of them and leave just this shriveled, desiccated, skeleton-like corpse.
Yeah. I heard those spirits, I guess, could possibly be in like objects or in the air, I'm not sure.
Okay.
They could like spread through different ways.
Cool. So we've given you a very long-winded definition of a vampire. So let's get back to basics here. What's a cryptid? Again, Merriam-Webster says, a cryptid is a creature that is found in stories and that some people believe exists or say to have seen, but has never been proven to exist. So let's see where these two things intersect. Let's start with the positive. Let's see why vampires could be cryptids. To me, if you look at the definition of the cryptid, vampires are found in stories, and some people believe in them, but they've not been proven to exist. So it seems to me that's a no-brainer. That's a slam dunk. Vampires are cryptids.
Yeah, no question about it at that point.
Yeah. If we extend that a little further, many cryptid stories are based on real creatures. Like for years we heard about, the stories of the Kraken, and it turned out there actually is a giant squid that is probably what people called the Kraken for many, many years. It could be that some creatures inspired these vampire legends. Like there are vampire bats that drink the blood of animals. There are wolves that, go for the throat when they attack, and all these things could have been witnessed by an ancient person and fused into one being.
Yeah.
Just like a cryptid. Many of the cryptid stories we hear are inspired by real stories. But I kind of talk about some of the abilities of cryptids there, like the blood drinking and going for the throat and things like that. There are some other shared abilities too, right? That we see like with vampires and cryptids. What about... they say a vampire can change shape. It can be a wolf, it can be a bat, it can be fog. We've heard that before, right?
Yeah, you know what? I think I have actually heard of a vampire being like almost transforming into a wolf also. Mm-hmm. Now, once more, it might be connected to a bunch of TV shows, so don't trust everything that I say about that.
Well, it does. That goes all the way back to the Dracula story, though. That was in there.
And I've heard that too, like where it's one creature, but it looks like half vampire, half werewolf.
Yeah,
there's so many connections to dogman or werewolves, which leads to another thing: skinwalkers.
Right. It seems like all these things that we generally accept as cryptids have that exact same ability to change shape. And then, another ability that vampires have in some stories is hypnotic ability. Like you look into the eyes of Dracula and suddenly you go completely blank and he's able to drink your blood. And, we just had a podcast about this a while ago, looking into the eyes of a cryptid and how it can hypnotize you and, cause you to lose track of time and things like that.
Well, it makes me wonder in those, like, kind of romanticized versions, maybe that's what was happening. They're getting hypnotized by love or something.
Maybe.
And they were able to just take their blood.
Mm-hmm. Another thing vampires seem to share with most of the cryptids we've looked at is superhuman strength. I guess it's easier to explain superhuman strength on Bigfoot when he's like 8 feet tall and a mountain of muscle, but a vampire, even human-sized, is said to have double, triple, 10 times the strength of a human being. I guess the other thing I would point to support the idea of a vampire being a cryptid is, like cryptids, there is a strong and passionate group of believers that have believed in vampires forever. I mean, there are secret societies who meet and pretend to be vampires. There are people who think they've seen vampires. Well, I told you my story about thinking I saw a vampire hunter once.
Did you want to tell it? Or?
I've told it before, but I'll tell it again just really briefly. I was walking or driving by a cemetery late at night, and this guy was crossing the street, and it was really odd because it was like 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. He's walking across from the cemetery, and he's carrying a doctor's bag that had what looked like a wooden stake and a hammer sticking out of it. And around his neck was this huge cross. And I was thinking to myself, was he in there killing vampires? So yeah, I mean, I've seen that. I mean, was that just some whack job who believed in vampires and was out putting stakes in every dead body in the cemetery, or did he know something we don't?
Yeah. Now, the only problem with a large amount of believers is that I have not heard of many reports of like being attacked by by a vampire or anything like that. That could also be because many people are going missing, but I don't know.
Well, now see, that brings us to the next question, which is why vampires may not be cryptids. And for that, I turn to our local skeptic here.
Yeah, so the first point is, if they're just like infected humans, then they can't just be cryptids because they're not separate creatures necessarily.
Right. They're no more a cryptid than a person with the flu or a person with COVID.
Yeah.
They're just suffering from a disease. That's a fair point.
Then also, like you said, there's like no evidence.
Yeah, it's true. You know, when we're talking about Bigfoot or dogman, you're looking for prints, or you're looking for tree structures, or you're looking for, all these various things that they may leave behind. Maybe you leave, gifts for them, and you see the apples are disappearing and whatever, but there's really nothing from a vampire. The only evidence is that, as you said, people disappear without a trace. Or maybe you find the bodies with no blood in them, but...
And also, if you were to see a dead body with, let's say the marks on their neck, they were bitten by a vampire,
Mm-hmm.
I think many would assume that's from some wild animal that aims for the neck.
Yeah. Well, remember that one case we talked about with the supposed mountain lion attack? The guy was like drained of his blood, and then he was attacked at the neck, and everybody said, oh, okay, mountain lion. But
yeah.
I would think we'd be finding a lot more evidence if there were vampires out there. Unless vampires have just gotten really, really good at hiding. Maybe they
hiding in caves.
Hiding in caves or hiding among human population.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't attack people anymore because that brings too much heat on them. Maybe they attack animals. Maybe those chupacabra things that we've been seeing, the animals drained of their blood, are actually vampires doing it.
Maybe.
But yes, I mean, you don't find evidence of them like you find of traditional cryptids.
Yeah.
And I guess, the last thing that we talk about for why vampires may not be cryptids, while some cryptids have supernatural abilities, the vampire seems to be like a supernatural creature. There doesn't seem to be a way a vampire can exist without magic of some sort.
Yeah, it's like a dark magic magician. I mean, he could like suddenly turn into a bat in pure daylight or night.
Mm-hmm.
Not daylight.
Yeah. Yeah, in daylight he turns into a pile of ash.
Yeah.
I will say though, if you consider skinwalkers a cryptid, then you could technically say that's a cryptid too. So
That's a good point. I mean, skinwalkers also would not exist without dark magic. Maybe that's a discussion for another day. Our skinwalkers cryptids. I've actually read a lot of people don't consider them to be cryptids for just that reason. I don't know. I think there's strong evidence from both sides. My gut feeling, again, the definition to me is a 1-to-1 match. So I consider vampires to be cryptids. But what do you guys think?
Well, I kind of agree with you. I mean, there's not enough reports to confirm that's a real animal or just some creature of some kind. But not enough evidence to confirm that's even real, though. I really don't. For all you know, it could just be a piece of fan art that went really far.
Yeah, the equivalent of going viral in ancient Greece.
Yeah.
From what I could tell, at least, they seem to have a lot of differences from humans, even though there's a lot of similarities. Like the teeth we often see are like sharper. Something would have to be, of course, transformed from a human to something else, even if it does look kind of similar.
So you feel like the minute it transforms and becomes something other than human, then it qualifies as a cryptid?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, that's fair. Because that is another thing that people have always said, why vampires can't be cryptids. It's because they're too human. And, we talked about that a little bit with the viral version of the vampire, but a Bigfoot is pretty human too, in terms of his behavior, in terms of, a lot of people feel like he's just a couple steps behind us on the evolutionary chain. And then, dogman, depending on which version of dogman you believe in, might also be in human form half the time, dog form half the time. So I think if you draw that line, that when they are not 100% human, they are cryptid, then I think the vampire qualifies.
Yeah. We'll have to go back down Sesame Street and look further.
Yeah, we'll find the count.
Yeah.
Well, as always, we thank you for listening and following us on this rambling journey of ours. And if any of you have any vampire stories or experiences you'd like to share with us, or if you'd like to weigh in with your opinion on this, we would love to hear. Do you think a vampire is a cryptid? As always, thank you for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again.